been lucky not to deal with very much prejudice, but actually, the prejudice I deal with the most in publishing is actually being an Arkansan. I'm so serious. I work with a lot of people who are in California and New York, and then we're at the airport, and they're like, where are you going? And I say Arkansas, and they're like, confused. It's made me very fierce and very defensive of Arkansas, actually. I actually, I think, deal with more regional prejudice than, I still have some, but, more than being a Black woman.
How much of you do you put into your writing?
I think any person, any creative, you can't help but put a little bit of yourself into every story you write. Like, with Beast of Prey, those books are split into 3 POVs, but one of them is a boy, and people have asked, like, who do you relate to more, Kofi or Ekon in those books? And it's Ekon because he's like a deeply anxious book nerd, and I'm like, that's me. So yeah, I don't think about it. It's usually not until I finished writing the whole book that I'm like, oh, I did it again, because you have to sort of detach and not overthink it or you get stuck. So there are things about Medi that are pulled like from very personal experience, and there are things that are pulled from the experiences of people I know and love, and then there are things that are just totally my imagination. And hopefully, if I've done my job right, you can't tell what's been pulled from real life. When you read about Medusa in Greco-Roman mythology, a lot of times she was a beautiful woman with beautiful hair. She's reduced to that. There's not much said about her personality or her background. It's just beautiful girl, beautiful hair. And when I think about the intimacy specifically, like hair is intimate in many communities, but my reference is within the Black community. The intimacy that hair carries, the way that it can say so much about you without you opening your mouth, the way it can be a symbol of love, the way it can be a symbol of loss of identity in so many different ways. It opened up all these beautiful opportunities to talk about it. One thing, and again, not a true spoiler, there's a moment when obviously Medi becomes Medusa and she loses her locks. And that moment, for me, is the moment she loses innocence. It's not tied to sex. I don't actually like the idea of tying loss of innocence to your losing of your virginity. It's a literal symbol of her shedding and losing by force this childhood where her sisters have helped her form her locks and take care of them, and she's losing them and it's being replaced with something foreign that doesn't necessarily feel right and might even be violent. And I think about, like, there's so many different reference points in my very real life. My grandmother grew up in 1940s Harlem and talked about how the girls with good hair were treated differently in the Black community in Harlem. Or, I cannot do my own hair, y'all. But growing up, like my mom, and I didn't appreciate it, but I had very thick, like a lot of really thick hair. My mom would so gently take care of it, and she would never let me and my sister out the house with our hair not done. Because for her, if you're walking out the house with your hair not done, that means there's nobody at home looking after you. So it's literally not just oh, you look nice, it's also a symbol that somebody loves you and is taking time out to make sure you look your best. Obviously, I went to a prep school in Little Rock, so like literally straightening my hair because I didn't feel like I could be myself entirely in those environments. There's just, hair is so intimate, and I don't necessarily see it talked a lot about in fantasy spaces, so I almost had to, again, rein myself in and not go too far down all these different rabbit holes, but it was really fun to talk about.
And Athena becomes, she's a goddess, she's the goddess.
Yeah.
She's the one that she's
the girl boss.
She has a priestess to worship. Yeah, she is it. She's a mentor. She's everything to Medi. Do you want to talk a little bit about that relationship of a woman in power and a young girl, and where that connection is, and then of course the inevitable.
Yeah, I think to be clear, like Medusa is not at all the first, second, or third Medusa retelling, and I think in a lot of the stories that favor the Roman version where Athena curses her, Athena is just objectively a bad, like she's just a villain, she's heartless, and she's still pretty awful in this book. But what I wanted to show was that, and this happens in the real world, sometimes the women who survive in these super patriarchal systems who've made it, put the ladder up behind them. And it's not necessarily to be malicious, but it's a way to survive because they're terrified of it being taken away from them. And we see that. In this world, the gods get their power from faith and belief. So Athena has all this power, but she's acutely aware that it can be taken away. And there's a really sad moment when she's reminded, you're a powerful goddess, but you're still a goddess. And there are gods, there are males that are still more powerful than you. And so she's not necessarily meant to be like pitied, but hopefully it gives her more nuance that she is horrible, but she's also in some way, like the women in this book are trapped in all these different ways and they react differently to being trapped. And I like that Medi and ultimately Medusa gets to make the choice at the end that that's not the kind of woman I want to be. Beginnings are my favorite and also the hardest part of a book to write because in the beginning, like nothing is said, but you also just don't know if you're starting in the right place. So that wasn't the original beginning, but after a few attempts and I got there, I was like, I have one of those, yep, this is the right spot. And I think, like, okay, so you all know, like, if you're on Instagram, on Reels, on TikTok, you see, like, people crash out, right? And it's fun, like, for 30 seconds, you go to crash out. But you never see, like, what led up to the crash out. And so I like this idea of showing her in her full rage, fully detached from, at that point, her humanity, the Medusa that we all know, and then she goes back to being Medi. And there's a distinct, I've heard some people be like, I don't like that she changed her to Medi, that sounds like a childish thing, but it's deliberate because she starts out, it's a term of affection. So a lot of you have nicknames that your family call you. The idea is that she's Medi, she's a young kind of girl on the cusp of womanhood, and the people who call her Medi see her as that. The people who call her Medusa are aging her up and putting her in an adult category before she's ready. Later in the book, when she's sort of forced into that, there's like a symbolic change. If you have those family nicknames, some of you still use them, but some of you can remember when you asked your parents to stop calling you that because you felt like that belongs to my childhood, I'm not a kid anymore. So I literally refer to them as almost different characters, even though it's the same person, because Medi is this young, naive, hopeful girl, and Medusa is this woman who has been harmed and jaded and is the result of all that rage that builds up throughout the book.
The cover, if you have a book with you, will you hold it up? And then let other people around you kind of, okay, you got plenty. So this is possibly the most gorgeous cover I've ever seen on a book. And not just because it's beautiful in itself, but because it reflects what's inside the book. But I found myself, as I was reading the book, going back to it and just like seeing if I could see more. And I did. Every time I saw it, I saw more. And I'm friends with authors.
When we took this book out to different publishers and I got to have conversations with different editors who were interested in buying the book, I ended up going with the last editor I talked to because she asked such thoughtful questions. I mean, we were immediately like aligned. And so when it came time to do the cover, she sent me, I don't know if you all read Circe, but the same artist who did the cover of Circe did the cover of this book. So that was already a good sign. That's so cool. Did a lot of Stephen King's books, a lot of Victoria Schwab's books, if you were a fan of her. So he already had a really impressive pedigree. But one cool thing is that initially so gave me several different mock-ups, different ideas. I went with this one. But I said, I don't know if in profile it's clear enough that she's a Black woman. And so I actually sent him different pictures of different Black women in profile to make sure the lips and the nose were right, because it's a story of a Black girl, and he took it and listened. So it's luck, but it's also people willing to listen and people being willing to collaborate that it came together.
It's